Hello, thank you for the kind invitation. I'm very happy to be back to Kaunas, actually. You're going to see I'm not an artist, and I'm not going to share beautiful and inspiring pictures or videos from artistic project. I'm going to do the dry one. You know, you need, in a session like this, the dry, boring slide. This is me. So I'm a consultant working on many international projects, and I've been specialized over the years on capacity building, helping artistic or cultural organizations to grow and work internationally. And currently, I'm the director of the International Resource Office of the Skåne region, based in the south of Sweden, run by Transeuropal. I will come back to this. And I'm also coordinating a transnational residency program at Dans Allena in Copenhagen, which is the National House of Dance, let's say. But I guess today, if I'm here with you, it's because I'm part of two boards. One board, which is the FACE, Fresh Arts Coalition Europe, a network dedicated to hybrid performing arts, and doing only one thing, pushing all its members to do international projects. And the second one is On the Move, that you may have heard. A very, very, very important and interesting platform to access information on cultural mobility. To talk about cultural networks, and we heard this word of networks a lot today, I would like to go back to concepts, and concept that we developed some years ago already with the European Commission when having what they call the structured dialogue. Ooh, structured dialogue, that's interesting. The idea for all of us meaning European networks, representing a lot of different fields from cinema, film directors, translators, museums, performing arts, etc., was to try to provide politicians, decision makers with small tools or big tools to be able to understand what they do when they do things to the arts and the culture field. And we came with something pretty much like this. You will find long reports, many interesting studies, but basically, to have a good ecology of arts and culture, you need 5 key elements. These 5 elements are education, creation, production, diffusion, and documentation. I'm sure it's somewhere here. So these 5 elements encompass more or less all the activities in relation to a good ecology of the arts. That means, for example, in education, it goes from the amateur practices to the very high-level schools that we can find for theatre and circus. Creation encompasses the creativity time of artists. The moment you prepare and nourish your ideas, production is project-based, diffusion and distribution is basically channeling the artistic work and make a living out of it. And the documentation encompasses both the academic research and journalism and art criticism. So the idea is that this ecology for the arts is good when all these elements are vibrant, are existing and are supported. And of course, when they are interconnected. There's not one element stronger or bigger than the other. All of them are important. And this is the message we wanted to convey to all the politicians and decision makers that are active in the cultural field. All these elements only works with 2 key additions. One is, of course, the audience, citizens, the different publics and communities that are going to interact with these elements, and the international dimension. And this is where European networks come in action. This cyclical, integrated chain of processes is more or less known as the value chain. So I'm sure you heard about the value chain. This is one example of value chain. That I took from the Mapping the Creative Value Chain, a study commissioned by the European Commission and realized by IDEA, Key and Smith. The idea is that the European cultural networks, gathering members from different countries, are going to be active in all these elements. So you are probably part of European networks, and I hope you will join a lot of European networks. Networks are existing to help you connect, find partners, find friends, learn from colleagues and peers, and realize new projects, build your own competencies. A few years ago, a group of networks decided to put on paper, just one page, all these common issues we were dealing with. And it's a small text that was circulated, drafted by many networks and endorsed by much more networks than, and the names are not here, I'm sorry. The reason that it's to inspire, be inclusive, test new ideas, pilot new projects, help the culture sector to take risks and meet new challenges. Networks are really gathering many different kinds of players. We heard this morning that there is a network of Creative Europe Desk, there is a network of European Capitals of Cultures, you have networks of festivals, network for jazz, network for architecture, photography. It is important for all these profiles to be able to connect, exchange, and be inspired to be able to develop further. So the idea that this ecology of the arts, the best way to develop activities for artists, for citizens, needs this international dimension. And we can see today in Europe there is, and that was also said this morning, real threats about the ecology of the arts when boundaries or countries start to close their doors. The international dimension is really part of the DNA of a good ecology. There are a lot of networks. You all have networks, personal networks, professional networks. And I'm going to focus on a couple of networks that are really formalized. What does that mean? Formalized means you can join them, you can be fully members of these platforms, and these platforms integrate, most of them, organizations. But it's true that a few of them, formalized, integrate also individuals. Might be artists, might be freelancers, but the idea is to connect people that have the same values or the same interest and that look towards the same benefits to grow and expand their activities. These relationships are formalized with a legal structure, so you have an association and you pay a membership fee and you join this association, or you have a consortium, which is most of the time project-based, and you sign an agreement with colleague organization and you're going to develop together a project. I'm going to try to map or present very briefly different examples, so if you're not familiar with some names, you can catch some information. At European level, we have a lot of networks of networks. So networks gathering national federation, and I'm thinking in particular of the NEMO, the network of museums organization that gathers national federations of museums. The same goes with Europa Cantat, that gathers national federation of choirs, for example. Then you have sectorial or thematic networks. Sectorial jazz, thematic on-the-move cultural mobility. And you have project networks. And this is always a bit tricky for many operators to really fully make the difference between the projects. Usually the project-based network are formed, these consortium, because of funding opportunities. And we have a lot of Creative Europe Desk representative in the room, and they know that these project networks are very interesting, not only because they deliver project, but because also they open a lot of new roads, a lot of opportunities for people to benefit from residencies outside of their country, mobility opportunities, training opportunities, etc. Very quickly, a couple of networks. Culture Action Europe, typically a network of networks, doing a lot of advocacy work in Brussels. And I'm sure on the social networks recently you heard about this big campaign to increase the European budget for arts and culture. led by Culture Action Europe. Unique, another interesting profile of network, gathering national institutes, so government bodies, not really festivals, not really artistic practitioners. European network of cultural centers based in Brussels and gathering like hundreds of cultural centers, very active in many different artistic disciplines. ENCAT, a niche, I would say, network that focuses on policy making and cultural management. So you see the scope of the network and their interest is quite wide. And then European Dance House Network, obviously, European Festivals Associations, one of the oldest network in Europe, more than 50 years. European Theatre Convention, Informal European Theatre Meeting, which is known as the International Contemporary Performing Arts Network. Most of these networks are based in Brussels, and they are both supporting their members in connecting, equipping them to develop international projects, but also to grow. They have a lot of training, workshops, lectures, etc. And they are key in defending or promoting arts and culture in Brussels to the different European institutions and make sure that this small sector, compared to many others, is not lost, but still very high in the agenda. So I was very pleased this morning to see that the representative, a member of the European Parliament, was there to, say culture is important and we don't forget about it. FACE, the network that I share these days, is again a niche network, but focusing only on international collaboration. So this network doesn't do studies, we don't do surveys, we don't publish things, we don't do magazines, we don't organize training, because we consider we have to be in complementarity with what's existing. So this network really focuses on the making of international partnerships. And we have a truly international dimension in the sense that we really organize activities outside of Europe. So not only preparing projects within the European continent, but also trying to connect Europe with America, South America, Australia, Southeast Asia, etc. We experiment every year or every second year some pilot projects, how to build a co-spectatorship program to increase audience development, how to develop artistic residencies in farms and connect with another sector, etc., etc. And we try to be always relevant. The concept of this small network is not to be stuck and solidified, as we say in Brussels. So not to be an institution, but always to be very reactive and continue to develop and answer needs from the field. And the second network I would like to put a focus on, because I believe this is a wonderful platform that is able to feed a lot of informal and formal projects that can happen across Europe, is On the Move. On the Move was born really more than 15 years ago now, just as a website, and really grew and developed into a small network gathering many different kinds of members. European networks, national institutions, research centers, funders, with this idea that cultural mobility should be always high in the agenda, and that all the information around artistic and cultural mobility should be informed, should be defended. So this is, I've put just a snapshot of the website On the Move. This is not a lovely, again, website. We are not very good in, doing this kind of super trendy, whatever, very expensive website. We put all the money on all the information that is in the website. And on this website, you can find a lot of news on all the calls that are available for artists and cultural managers or cultural workers, calls that are always supported, so financed or co-financed, and the small team, only 2 part-time persons, spend a lot of time updating mobility guides. So you will find quite easily information if you want to travel to almost any country in the world. So do support this kind of initiative, as they are very important. As a conclusion, I would say that European networks are very active and close acquainted to the European capitals of culture. Each time a capital city invites European networks to deliver activities, big-scale conferences, artistic programs, training opportunities. But what's interesting in this relationship with European capitals is that all the players, all the cultural players from Kaunas, for example, can be very active members of these networks. And when you know, dreaming about 2022, I would say the best next step would be to join this network, to be equipped, to come with interesting partnerships and amazing projects in collaboration with other European cultural organizations. Thank you.
Do we have questions for Yohann? Yeah, please.
Yohann, thank you for that. I think I'm going to ask you an awkward question that will probably be one that other people are thinking about as well. Where does the money come from to start this? Once you have the ball rolling, it's one thing. But how do you start a network like this? You know, you don't just sit down in a room and say, we're going to make a website, because it has a cost. It has a human cost. Somebody has to pay for that. Where do you start getting the money from?
Yes and no. Honestly,
by the way, I speak as someone who's been running a European network for a quarter of a century with no European funding at all.
Yeah.
And I know what it costs. And we don't have any staff at all. We do it all on a voluntary basis.
Yeah.
So, you know, you can't tell me anything simple because I know what I'm talking about. Okay?
On the Move is not supported by the EU, and FACE is not supported by the EU. Today, only 28 European networks are supported by the Creative Europe programs. I would say it's less than half of the European cultural networks. Money is an issue, but sometimes money is not an issue. To start a WordPress website doesn't cost a lot, almost anything. Many networks started in the kitchen of a group of cultural operators that decided they should start an initiative. I would say that the more people are around the table, the more, or the burden is less to really to run an organization. From my experience, because I've always, it's been 20 years now, I'm in EU or European networks, so I've seen it all in terms of commitment, in terms of voluntary work, in terms of money, in terms of, many things. Governance, which is very key, statutes and bank account and everything. I would say that the more the people around the table or the organization around the table value the network and value the values of the network and are committed because they see clear, concrete benefits, they will spend the time necessary to run a network. Then if it's something far away in Brussels, something that looks like it's disconnected from the ground, from the artistic practice, from the managing organization, then people are quite reluctant sometimes to invest their own time and energy and resources, skills to make this work.
Can I do a follow-up on that?
Yeah.
Thanks, Jon. That's a really good answer, actually. The follow-up on what you just said is the relevance of Brussels. You know, those of us who have networks that don't have offices in Brussels sometimes feel that we're excluded from the ability to network with quite the same smooth seamlessness as the ones that do have offices in Brussels. And then some of us have developed personal relationships with the offices of the Commission and so on that overcome this. But anybody who is establishing a new network that is not going to be based in Brussels, which is, by the way, quite an expensive business anyway to be based in Brussels, you know, you've got a lot of hurdles to overcome. So, I mean, I'm just going to throw this into the pond like a rock and see what happens when the ripples go out. How can we work together, all of us, to reduce the focus of the clique in Brussels and to make it available and accessible to everybody else around Europe as well? And you've already been a little bit critical of the Brussels centrism. What can we do about it in practice?
You know, in practice, it really depends on the purpose of the network you are establishing or you run. These networks are based in Brussels because they have a clear mandate to represent a sector, music, museums, etc., and defend the interest of their membership. A lot of networks are just clubs of people, like-minded people, or very comparable organization that wants to work together. And they don't need the Brussels legal seat or offices.
And you don't have the money to pay for it?
Say again?
What if you do need the Brussels seat, but you don't have the money to pay for it? It costs 60 to 70,000 a year to have an office with a part-time person in Brussels.
I know.
Yeah.
We don't. Like Face, we don't have
I was in Austria.
yeah, and we are in Paris. We share usually, and this is the case for On the Move, we share an office with organizations. So ITN is very kindly hosting On the Move office in Brussels. And actually, you find also a lot of synergies between organizations. We are in an era of co-working spaces and sharing of the very limited resources we have, I would say.
Yeah. Any more questions? Yohann Floch, thank you very much.
Thank you.